Meganeuropsis was a giant dragonfly that lived on our planet almost 300 million years ago. It was about the size of a modern-day falcon, with a wingspan as long as your leg. It had long and sharp claws that it used to catch food and for protection. They could even grab small animals and carry them through the air. Their speed and maneuverability made them formidable hunters. Meganeuropsis is the most giant insect ever found on Earth. Scientists believe it might have reached this colossal size because there used to be more oxygen in the air. There were other gigantic insects that lived before the dinosaurs too. Some ancient ants could grow to the size of a hummingbird. And if that wasn't scary enough, they could also spit acid, like something out of a movie. These ants lived in large colonies, and their anthills were several times bigger than the ones we see today and could resemble a bear's den. This thing is an Arthropleura, an ancient ancestor of the giant millipede. This monster dwarfed the last two animals, growing to the length of a car. It lived in rainforests, and it could move at great speed. Imagine being chased by one of these. Fortunately, Arthropleura weren't carnivores like today's centipedes. They only ate plants. Another reason the insects grew so big back then is that there was less direct competition. They could evolve and grow without being eaten by more successful animals. Brontoscorpio lived about 400 million years ago and could reach 3 feet in length. That's 15 times longer than modern scorpions. And unlike modern ones, it had not 2, but 4 claws. This amazing creature could also breathe on land and underwater. That's because it had both gills and lungs. It's believed that these guys were some of the first to evolve and change their habitat from water to land. Now, onto a far stranger marine animal, Anomalocaris. It's thought to be the very first predator to live on our planet. It was half the length of a human, their eyes had color vision, and they were likely the most advanced of any living organism 500 million years ago. They used their sharp claws and mouth parts for hunting trilobites, crabs, and sea scorpions. It's possible that Anomalocaris was what eventually pushed crabs and scorpions onto the land. They might not look very similar, but Anomalocaris was also an ancient ancestor of modern crabs. Dunkleosteus was an enormous ancient fish. These guys were half the length of a school bus and weighed the same as a small car. They had no teeth, but evolved to use the bone plates on their jaws as a replacement, leading to their crazy appearance. This allowed them to have the biting power of a modern Mississippi alligator. Most impressively, it could close its jaw multiple times in less than a second. This created a powerful flow of water right into its mouth. Smaller fish would get caught in the current and pulled right into a Dunkleosteus' mouth. Their skull was heavily protected by bony armor. It was like it was wearing a helmet. This protected it from almost any strikes and made it the apex predator of its time. Achmonistion is the ancestor of all sharks in existence, living around 340 million years ago. No one knows why, but in addition to the usual shark fin, it had something that looked like an anvil on its back. Another feature of the Achmonistion was a massive spike on the underside of its body. It was very sharp and covered with many teeth. Tiktaalik were some of the first animals to set foot on land. It had gills and scales, like a fish, but it also had some of the features of land animals. It looked a bit like a cross between a fish and a lizard. Its front and back fins began to turn into limbs, so it could crawl along shorelines. And it developed lungs as it spent more time out of the water. This weird fish may be the ancestor of pretty much every modern land animal today, including us. Back to land, this is a Dimetrodon. It looks like a lizard, but it's actually a synapsid, a close relative of mammals. It was the size of an alligator and had a giant sail on its back. Scientists aren't certain, but it's believed that the Dimetrodon used this sail to get heat from the environment faster. It also helped them camouflage themselves in the tall grass. These guys are often confused with dinosaurs, but they disappeared 40 million years before the first dinosaurs appeared. Over time, synapsids evolved into full-fledged mammals. And if we go further down this chain, we'll find out that humans evolved from these guys too. Dinocephalians. The name of these guys literally translates to scary-headed. This is because, in the process of evolution, their skulls became much thicker. These creatures were usually 19 feet long and weighed the same as a car. Some of them had long fangs like a saber-toothed tiger, but these giant lizards were herbivores. That doesn't mean that they were completely peaceful and docile, though. Scientists believe they fought within their species. They smashed their heavy foreheads into each other, like rams do now. Dinocephalians existed at a time when all our continents were still connected in a supercontinent, called Pangaea. Gorgonopsia looked a little like Dinocephalians, only these guys were carnivores. They were about the size of a wolf, but they spent a lot of time in water too. They usually lived on coastlines and could dive into the sea looking for food. They were also the first predators that could run fast. This is one reason why Gorgonopsia ruled the world about 265 million years ago. Later, these species mysteriously disappeared, leaving the dinosaurs to dominate the Earth. The cause of the mass extinction about 240 million years ago is unknown. But the second event that caused the extinction of 95% of all living organisms on Earth was a giant meteorite. The oldest tree remains are 385 million years old. Archaeologists found them inside a rock, where there were traces of the roots of many species of trees. These ancient trees evolved and began to turn the carbon dioxide in the air into oxygen. Gradually, they created the atmosphere we have now. This is the oldest winged insect in the world, Rhyniognathus. It's about 400 million years old, and there's still debate about the way it lived. Supposedly, it fed on plants, but it also might have eaten other animals. The oldest species of millipede is Pneumodesmus pneumani. It may have been the first living organism to breathe on the barren Earth around 400 million years ago. This little guy was only as long as a seed, but we only have one fossil, so they might have grown a bit bigger. Pneumodesmus might be a distant relative of all the millipedes and centipedes that exist today. The farther we go back in time, the more bizarre the living organisms look. 480 million years ago, Agirocassis coasted through the ocean. For its time, it was the largest animal on the planet, reaching 6.6 feet in length. Fortunately for other sea creatures, it wasn't a scary hunter. It ate the same way that the blue whale does today, swallowing loads of water so it could catch all the tiny things living in it. Dickinsonia lived 550 million years ago. These floating ovals varied a lot in size. Some could be the size of a fingernail, while other species were as big as a kitchen plate. The largest Dickinsonia may have been as wide as a stingray. These animals are so primitive that they didn't even have a skeleton. Some scientists thought it wasn't even an animal, but a fungus. But that was later disproven. Charnia was another animal that scientists originally thought was a plant. They believed that it was just the leaf of something like a fern. They realized that it was an animal when it was found that Charnia lived deep underwater, where photosynthesis is impossible. These guys swam near the bottom of the sea and fed on nutrients from the water. Instead of a traditional digestive system, these things had filters. They ran water through them to catch food in it, like the Agirocassis. The first living organism is thought to have appeared about 4.2 billion years ago. When the oceans first formed, they were filled with things needed for life to exist. Under high temperatures, this matter began to interact and join together, forming the first living organism. This is why we look for planets with liquid water. We know life on Earth started with water, so many people believe that water is the most important factor in the origin of life.
Ah, that's funny. Well, everything is when you're a giant hyena, Pachecrocuta. If you want to picture how animals from ancient times look like, just imagine them way bigger with larger and sharper teeth. And wait, like that isn't enough? Yup, you had to be one mighty beast to survive in such times when everything around you is like 5XL. This hyena was up to 3 feet tall with a weight of 400 pounds. That's the size of a modern lion and around 3 times bigger than today's hyena. The ancient one also had shorter legs, which is also the reason plenty of prehistoric creatures went extinct. Over time, they ran out of food, but couldn't run fast or long enough to catch prey. Also, they couldn't escape quickly enough if there was some bigger guy nearby. Ancient and modern hyenas have quite similar habits. Diet, meat, meat, and meat. They both prefer to steal fruit from other usually smaller predators rather than go hunting on their own. And of course, they're both always smiling at everyone around. Cheese! You always somehow picture sharks as those marine animals we should be afraid of, right? Not whales. They're mostly good-natured, eating their plankton, spraying out water through that hole in their backs and stuff. And of course, they could get a little clumsy from time to time, so they turn over a ship. Anyway, they're not that into hunting humans. Well, if we all lived in the time of this 50-foot, 50-ton whale, Leviathan, I like to call Toothy, let's just say going to the beach would never be the same. The beast weighed like 6 elephants and was longer than a truck. Oh yeah, about that Toothy thing? This whale had teeth longer than your palm and a quite refined hunting instinct. So it went after all marine animals, including other whales too. Its only rival was the megalodon itself, the only biggest and scariest shark that ever lived on our planet. Okay, of course, this list is full of giant and dangerous animals with extra sharp teeth who you're certainly glad they went extinct. But there's also some close relative to a human ancestor here too. Hello, distant cousin? Paranthropus. So our cousin P had a big brain, well, at least for those times, and good reflexes, which is why they could defend themselves against some bigger and less brainy creatures that were after them. They mostly ate plants, roots, nuts, soft fruits, young leaves, probably insects, and seeds. They were around 5 feet tall and 150 pounds in weight. Not that big compared to other prehistoric mammals, but still big enough to survive those tough times. Way to go, P! The next one is, yes, I'm very happy these things went extinct, prehistoric mammal, Gorgonopsia. They were something between mammals and reptiles with, of course, very, very big 5-inch saber-like teeth, an 18-inch long skull, and the size of a modern bear. At their beginnings, these guys were really small, no bigger than a dog. After a while, evolution did its thing and turned them into the biggest carnivores of their time, which was over 250 million years ago. I wasn't around then. Scientists still don't know if they had clear skin, fur, or scales, but they do know these beasts had rather long legs compared to the rest of their body, which means they could run much faster than many other animals from those times. Andrewsarchus, or Andy, my nickname for it, is everything you would attribute to today's predators, such as tigers, wolves, or hyenas. Only a bit more intimidating version, of course, with extremely sharp teeth. Who would have thought the biggest meat-eating mammal that ever lived is actually a part of the family where pigs, camels, and antelopes came from? It had the size of a modern bison, with a weight of at least half a ton. Andy wasn't that picky with the menu, so it went after most other animals that lived back then, which was around 40 million years ago. It seems ancient times were those where tigers or some other predators were afraid of pigs, unlike today. Yup, step back, Terminator pig, Entelodon, is on its way. Okay, research actually showed they were more like hippos, whales, and its cousin Andy. But this cool nickname has already been given, so we can't go back. Early Terminator pigs were no bigger than today's swines, but they grew to become cow size over time. They also had short snouts, but a couple of million years later, evolution decided that's not scary enough and made their lower and upper jaws much longer. Oh, and they got an even sharper set of canines, a special How to Creep Your Rivals edition. Whew! Finally an ancient mammal we don't have to be afraid of. Well, at least if we're not in its way, because if this giant accidentally stepped on you, squish. But at least its menu consisted of plants, so we would be safe at some point. Let me introduce you to the gentle giant Thunder Beast, Brontotherium. It had quite a sturdy nasal horn, weighed 3 tons, and was 16 feet in length, which is bigger than a modern rhino. The size, unfortunately, didn't help it much. Andy was always just breathing down its neck, preying at it and its companions. Such a list definitely can't go without the menacing saber-toothed cat. Around 4 feet long, 100 pounds, agile, completely capable of hunting in coordinated packs. But you know cats, they like to brag about the catch they got on their own. That's our Megan, Megatherion. You can find her and her companions all over the world, in Europe, Asia, North America, and Africa. Now, we often think all big cats are into running after their prey, but Megan wasn't built for speed at all, nor did it sprint after her prey like some other cats. No, she preferred to wait for the prey to get closer. She would choose a good spot, climb up some tall tree, hide, and simply chill. After a while, some innocent herbivores would go there to drink some water, and bam! Surprise! Megan's down. Her hunting style is something we see in leopards today. Teeth were her main weapon, so gotta watch out for those big upper canines. Oh, finally a name I can more easily pronounce, so I don't have to come up with my own. The giant short-faced bear. This beast could run up to 40 miles per hour. After it cornered its prey, the bear would rear up to its full height, 13 feet, so the poor animal knew nothing good was about to come. Cave bears usually prefer vegetables, but as far as this short-faced one was concerned, nah, meat is way better. It liked to hunt as well as collect what other predators would leave behind. Also, as far as is known, apparently no one ever asked this short-faced bear, "Hey, why the long face?" Leo, the prehistoric lion, Thylacoleo. Gee, sounds like a pharmaceutical. Anyway, 5 feet long, 200 pounds, insanely strong jaws, sharp teeth, long retractable claws, muscular body. Hey, it's me. No, not really. It also had a surprisingly powerful tail. Leo actually comes from the land down under, where ancestral kangaroos lived, and they also had quite strong tails to balance themselves. Okay, speaking of kangaroos, here's one small surprise: Leo's roots. You would think kangaroos, koala bears, and giant wombats were there just to live a happy life until they became someone's breakfast. But their family somehow raised an animal that looked like a saber-toothed tiger but with bigger teeth. Yes, Leo, way to go, breaking the stereotypes. Leo was somewhere at the top of the food chain in his times, even though he had one quite strong rival, a giant monitor lizard, Megalania, or even some plus-size crocodile, Quincana. Okay, move guys, this is not a video about reptiles, wait your turn. Prehistoric age, dinosaurs ruled all over the region, making a mess, while other animals shiver in fear and hide from them. Hey, not so fast, dinos! There's Mr. R, Raptors, a mysterious mammal that decided to stand up to the authorities. He showed up 130 million years ago and was a badger-like 3-foot-long animal. Doesn't sound much compared to the T-Rex and bigger dinos, but was way bigger than some of those feathery dinosaurs from the same time. Not only that, he would eat them. We don't know how exactly, but let's just say Mr. R had his own ways. I'm guessing it was for breakfast.
Over 100 million years ago, dinosaurs were all the rage, and mammals cowered in their huge shadow. But then, there was a badger-like creature that lived in Asia at the time, where most mammals were small and quick to get away from trouble. The Raptors was way bigger. It was the size of a large dog. Researchers think this creature wasn't too fast because it had short legs, but it was surely a carnivore, and surprisingly, there were dinosaur remains found in its fossilized belly. Turns out mammals were already evolving to rival the huge reptiles, and Raptors was one of the first to hunt them down instead of being hunted. It's not clear yet if the giant badger was a hunter or a scavenger, but it was big and bulky enough to be both. Dinos beware. Then there was the Opabinia. You could easily carry it around with you, but whether you'd want to is another matter, because it had not one, not two, but 5 eyes. The Opabinia looked so strange that when scientists reconstructed it in 1972, they first burst out laughing. The Opabinia had a trunk-like mouth which it used to fish around the mud for food, but because it didn't have teeth, it probably only ate soft food. The terror bird, a large carnivorous bird that looked like it stepped out of a horror movie. It had a sharp beak that had the force of a sledgehammer, which wouldn't have been good news for its prey. The terror bird was one of the most dangerous predators in South America during its time. It was a flightless bird, but it was also a very fast runner. The only way to outsmart it was to take sharp turns while running, for these birds could only run fast in a straight line. The megalodon was the largest fish that ever lived. Female megs were nearly twice as large as the males. Its name, megalodon, means big teeth, and no surprise, its teeth were 3 times larger than those of the great white shark. The megalodon appeared after the dinosaurs became extinct. Now, it's extinct too, but when it was alive, it seemed to have lived in nearly all parts of the world, except Antarctica. If you thought modern-day piranhas are bad, you should have seen the mega piranha that lived in South America millions of years ago. If you compare its size to a dog's, it was as long as a golden retriever and weighed as much as an adult cocker spaniel. The mega piranha could exert a force up to 50 times its own weight. Pound for pound, that's more powerful than even the T-Rex's bite. There were lions in North America that disappeared around 13,000 years ago. This was around the same time that mammoths went extinct. These lions were almost 25% larger than those of today. Fossils of these ancient lions were discovered in the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, along with many other interesting creatures. An armored fish, the Dunkel osteus, didn't have teeth, but that didn't matter because it had razor-sharp bone protrusions that were like a pair of shears. It could snatch its prey by opening and closing its mouth at a speed of 50 milliseconds. Some scientists believe the Dunkel osteus swam sideways like an eel. Fossils of this fish can be seen in many museums all over the world. The Titanoboa was the largest snake ever discovered. This giant crushing machine was even able to consume a crocodile. It lived 60 million years ago in the tropical forests of South America and looked more like a boa constrictor, but acted like a water-dwelling anaconda. Although the Titanoboa is now extinct, people still find it fascinating. There is a full-scale replica of it in Midtown Manhattan. The Tully monster lived 300 million years ago, but researchers learned about its existence only about 60 years ago. From what we know, it had a soft, torpedo-shaped body and vertical fins. The Tully monster was one of the most bizarre creatures ever, and scientists just couldn't figure out what it was. First, they thought it was a type of worm, then a sort of squid. Now, they say it's closest to a lamprey, which is a parasitic fish. The largest member of the canine family was the Epicyon, which is now extinct. The term Epicyon means more than a dog, and it certainly was. It was as long as a lion and weighed just as much, and its huge skull had a lion-like shape to it. The Epicyon may have either gone after prey or scavenged for food, but they ate everything from rhinos to horses. There was nothing to smile about if you ever came across a Smilodon, but don't worry, it went extinct many years ago. This saber-toothed tiger lived in the forests of North and South America until 10,000 years ago. The Smilodon had impressive upper body strength, which helped it wrestle its prey to the ground. This was bad news for all the mammals in its area because it was especially fond of having bison and camel for breakfast. The Jachyolopterus was a giant scorpion that lived in Germany 400 million years ago. It was longer than 2 yardsticks laid end to end, and it was the largest arthropod that was ever discovered. Its fossilized claw, found recently, was longer than a loaf of bread. The Jachyolopterus was called a sea scorpion, but it preferred to live in rivers and lakes. It was not a picky eater, and it ate fish and other aquatic animals smaller than itself. Even the smaller ones of its own kind weren't safe when the larger ones were around. One of the biggest flying insects of all time was the Meganeuropsis. It looked like a dragonfly, but its wingspan was unbelievably wide. These insects probably grew so big because there was more oxygen in the atmosphere then, which fueled their growth. Meganeuropsis lived in North America in the prehistoric era. It was so big and hungry that its diet included small lizards and young amphibians. To get rid of this creature, only a swatter larger than a table would be of any use, and a piece of its wing is still preserved at the Harvard Museum of Natural History. Whales were once land dwellers and moved to water only 50 million years ago. The Basilosaurus, despite its name, was not a dinosaur, but one of the first marine species, and it was much larger than other early whales. It was longer than a 4-story building, had a gigantic head, and a bite to rival the T-Rex. Fossils of some smaller whales carry the teeth marks of the Basilosaurus. This is not surprising, since it was one of the top predators of its time. It ate nearly anything, but its favorite food seemed to be dolphin-like creatures. If you thought grizzly bears were bad, you should have seen the Arctodus simus. This short-faced bear could run really fast, faster than wild horses and antelopes. One study suggests this bear consumed more meat in a day than most people would eat in a year. It used to dwell all across North America until 11,000 years ago. It used its enormous size to intimidate smaller predators, such as saber-toothed cats, American lions, and dire wolves. If you don't like rats, then the Joseph-Fortigacea will be your worst nightmare. The only thing worse than its name was its size. In fact, this rodent was as large as the bull of today. The giant rat lived in South America around 3 million years ago. It had fearsome front teeth that enabled it to ward off predators. It also made full use of those cutters to crop grass and other vegetation. The first bird was the Archaeopteryx. Some say it was the missing link between birds and dinosaurs. It was actually very small, no bigger than a raven. This animal had very sharp teeth, 3 fingers with claws, and a long bony tail. The Glyptodon was one of the armadillo's ancient relatives. Heavily armored with a round bony shell, it looked like a turtle, but was as large as a car. It was an herbivore, but it had a flexible bony tail, which it used to defend itself from predators and to fight its own kind. The Neuralagus rex was the T-Rex of rabbits, and it was nothing like the cute bunnies we're used to. For one thing, it was massive, weighing 6 times as much as the European rabbit of today. It ate roots and yams and lived in an idyllic insular environment that had no natural predators. Perhaps that's why it could grow so huge. Amongst the swamps lives a strange bird with a Dutch clog for a beak. It screeches a high-pitched whine, notifying other shoebills that this is its area when it comes to food. Its eerie calls add to the surrounding roars of dinosaurs in the distance. It's not hunting dinosaurs though, of course, but snakes, fish, lizards, and frogs amongst the reeds. This bird continued to survive even as the dinosaurs left this world. Fossil records of the shoebill date back to 65 million years ago, and today it continues to hunt in a similar environment. Although once widespread, today its restricted habitat is within several countries in Africa. The shoebill stands up to 60 inches tall, and its broad wings are built for soaring across the plains. But the main feature of the shoebill is, of course, its beak. Ancient in appearance, it's gone unchanged for ages. Its huge bulging bill measures up to 9 inches, which makes it the 3rd largest among all living birds. The upper mandible of the beak ends with a sharp nail, perfect for its prey. It lets the bird take them out with an instant peck. With a wide range of food at its disposal, It's known as one of the most terrifying birds. Its hunting behavior is still as effective as it was millions of years ago, which has made its survival possible. It feeds mainly on aquatic animals, fish, frogs, lizards, and even small crocodiles. So there's always been plenty of options at its own all-you-can-eat buffet. Surprisingly, their relationship with humans is a pretty chill one. That's why they're so popular among birdwatchers. This cool guy is just standing idle, staring down the lens, as if to say, "I've seen a lot worse than you." Lurking under the water in many countries around the world, another opportunistic hunter lays low beneath the shallows. Meet the saltwater crocodile. With an appearance that just straight up tells you it's ancient. It's been around for over 240 million years. Once appearing a lot larger, they've always had a reputation of taking down whatever came too close, even dinosaurs. They survived many catastrophic events and have continued to adapt to each of them. As they continue to evolve, they've become the ultimate survivalists as we know them today. Still, they sit within their territory, waiting for anything to enter, even humans. They grow up to 20 feet and have a powerful bite that's stronger than any other animal. 30 times stronger than your bite. Just saying. Anything that ends up in its toothy cage can't escape. With scales and armor plates protecting it, there isn't an animal on Earth that hunts it, making the crocodile the ultimate apex predator. As per its name, it's also adapted to saltwater, providing it with useful salt glands, something its alligator cousins don't have. And that's how they're able to swim enormous lengths out to sea. Their routes follow ocean currents, and they aren't afraid of bypassing the shark-infested waters. Not even the great white would mess with this one. The distances they've traveled measure up to 390 miles, and they're capable of reaching speeds up to 18 miles per hour. Just another reason not to swim in the sea, right? The next creature on our list has been around for up to 145 million years. These pesky little things have been feeding off warm-bodied animals. Can you guess what I'm talking about? Lice. Those guys originated in the Cretaceous period, between 145.5 and 65.5 million years ago, when they used to feed on dinosaurs once upon a time. And then, they have continued to remain a constant annoyance to most species. Currently, there are 5,000 different species of lice, each one having a taste for a different animal. They feed on all birds and mammals, except for pangolins and bats. Lucky them. They are an obligate parasite, which means they cannot live unless they live off another life form. Living their entire lives to reproduce on their hosts, lice will change their color to match the fur or feather of their new homeland. But how do you get lice as a human? Well, it's purely by luck or bad luck. They usually choose to leave when their original host has passed on. They seek a free flight from a nearby fly, grabbing onto its legs and hitching a ride to the new homeland. Within 4 small islands in Indonesia lives a powerful beast, a reminder of the megafauna period. Meet the Komodo dragon. Reaching a length up to 10 feet, it's a master ambusher. Its hunting method involves tracking down prey, then injecting venom into it. As the prey escapes, it will track it down as it slowly tires and then feeds on it. And that's how it's managed to survive for millions of years. But it has strangely disappeared from other parts of the world. These islands weren't always its home, and it's only been here for the past 4 million years. Originally, the dragon's ancestors came from Asia, but migrated south to Australia 40 million years ago. And with a great range and variety of food, that's where they grew to their massive size. Then, some 25 million years later, a collision with continental land masses occurred between Australia and Southeast Asia. Taking the opportunity, they spread even further, as far as East Timor. As the islands became separated, the Komodo dragons continued to flourish in their new lands. Without any competition, they could maintain their normal hunting methods. Unfortunately, in Australia, they all eventually disappeared due to competition from humans. Another ancient species is really intriguing, not only because of its appearance, Let me introduce it to you. The coelacanths. Scientists found the only evidence of their existence in their fossils. It made us believe they disappeared 410 million years ago. So, you could imagine the surprise when they were discovered in 1938, idly swimming along the east coast of South Africa. It's truly a fossil that's come back to life. It gave us a great opportunity to not only further understand this species, but to answer many questions about some of its relatives. Growing up to 6.5 feet, they have a lifespan of up to 100 years. But what's strange is they have 8 fins. They're the oldest known living member of the lobe-finned fish. They are so ancient that they're more related to amphibians, reptiles, birds, and even mammals than to the ray-finned fish we know. Armored with strong cosmoid scales and with a hinge on their jaw that allows them to open their mouth very wide, they are truly ancient-looking creatures. But they did evolve slightly differently than their ancestors, although they still look the same. They once lived in much shallower waters and originally used lungs to breathe. After the dinosaur age, they had to move into deeper waters to feed and gradually upgraded their lungs to gills. And it was this new ability that ensured their survival. Let's go even further back to 480 million years ago. You wouldn't think that anything that existed back then could possibly still be alive today. But the horseshoe crab is not only still on this planet, it's almost identical to its ancestors. Its whole body is protected by a thick plate with spikes pointing outwards. It has 10 eyes scattered around its body. 2 are used for finding mates, and the remaining 8 act as light receptors. There is also a long tail. Although it looks menacing, its only use is to simply help flip itself back the right way up if it gets knocked over. Its design is so effective that whatever constant changes the planet has provided, it survived. Although they look like they could be related to a lobster, they're actually closer to spiders and scorpions than crabs or crustaceans. With a healthy diet of clams, crustaceans, and worms, they find enough to eat along the coasts of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. They also feed on algae, so it makes sense why they manage to survive many food shortages caused by world events. With all the traits of the horseshoe crab, who knows, it might even outlive humans. Well, here's to the next 480 million years.
You decided to go scuba diving for the first time. The water is clear and the sun is shining on the seabed. You take a few selfies and the fish swimming by when suddenly the ocean goes pitch black. You look up and, oh my, what is that gigantic animal? It's definitely not a shark, not a whale. Is it a turtle? Yup, but fear not, it's not gonna hurt you. If you had lived on this same Earth about 72 million years ago, then maybe this could have really happened to you. Scientists have recently found the fossils of a gigantic marine turtle that could have grown as big as 12 feet. If you don't have any idea of how big that is, let's see some examples. That's the average length of a hippopotamus, 6 golden retrievers, or 2 Michael Jordans stacked on top of each other. The turtle's scientific name is an homage to that old-school sea monster called Leviathan. Maybe you remember this from old-school history lessons. The Leviathan is supposedly a mythical creature that would swallow entire ships or people that were deemed too greedy by the creature. Can you imagine being swallowed by this humongous sea turtle? No, thank you. The fossils of this gigantic creature began to be excavated between 2016 and 2021, all the way in northeastern Spain. The first fossil was located by a hiker in the Spanish Pyrenees, and it was around 8 inches long. The pelvis of this turtle alone measured around 35 inches. It would definitely be one of the biggest turtles today if it hadn't gone extinct. FYI, the largest living sea turtles today can reach up to 6 feet in length, which is already pretty big. Now, how about a gigantic prehistoric scorpion? I bet most people here are not huge fans of these creatures, especially since they're poisonous. Which is why the thought of a 9-foot-long aquatic scorpion might be the stuff of nightmares. Let's just say that if they hadn't gone extinct some 400 million years ago, lakes and rivers would be much more dangerous places for humans today. These gigantic insects were considered to be apex predators in their time, hunting everything from fish to other animals, even of their own kind. Yikes! I got goosebumps just imagining these creatures. Should we thank the asteroid that hit our planet now or later on in this video? Another prehistoric animal that would shock humans if it were still alive is the so-called Megatherium, a gigantic sloth. This huge sloth is believed to have grown up to 20 feet long, and its weight could be up to 8,000 pounds. It was found in the woodlands and grasslands of South America. The creature used to stand on its 2 feet in order to reach leaves on high branches. These giant sloths had huge claws. They helped them climb trees. I gotta say, I feel uncomfortable imagining these elephant-sized sloths climbing trees. Oh, of course, some dinosaurs will make our super-sized creatures list. But before that, here's a fun fact. Did you know some dinosaurs are still alive today? Scientists have proven that birds are classified as theropod dinosaurs. Such infamous creatures as the T-Rex and Velociraptor belonged to this group. I'm sure you've heard these names even before you watched Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor is that scary dino that breaks into the kitchen. Well, they evolved, gained some feathers, and turned into various species of birds we know today. That means that any bird from chickens to those little blue ones is a direct descendant of dinosaurs. Now, does the name Spinosaurus ring a bell? You can see this huge dinosaur in some museums today. Its fossils, I mean. The Spinosaurus was one of the biggest land predators to walk Earth. Actually, to walk its land and water, since scientists believe that this dino was semi-aquatic. It fed mostly on meat, which means humans would be its natural prey if it lived today. This meat-eating dino lived around 90 to 100 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long, 12 feet high, and weighed up to 22 tons. Its head was around the size of 8 bowling balls and was shaped like a crocodile's face. Basically, the Spinosaurus was a big African elephant with the face of a crocodile. Just kidding. But that would look funny though, wouldn't it? A much more attractive dino was this guy. It's considered to be the largest dinosaur that has ever lived on our planet. What made it so big was its extremely long neck and very long tail. You wouldn't want to stand behind this creature, believe me. If it decided to swish its tail, you'd get catapulted very far away. This creature lived around 100 million years ago, and its fossils were first found in Argentina around 2012. The dino measured 120 feet from head to tail, which made it almost as big as an American football field in width. And have I mentioned it weighed almost as much as a space shuttle? A staggering 75 tons. If it had been a carnivore, it would have probably been the greatest predator. But this big guy was a peaceful herbivore that had such a long neck that it could eat leaves from high trees. Cute, right? We must also talk about the Shastasaurus. As the name suggests, this animal is popularly known as the Mount Shasta lizard. Even though it was a marine reptile and probably never set foot on the mountain itself, this dino was usually around 23 feet long, but there was a specific strand of this species that could get as big as 69 feet long, about the size of the great blue whale. This made it the biggest marine reptile to have ever lived. A fun fact about the Shastasaurus is that scientists believe it didn't even have teeth, which means it could only feed on soft-bodied prey, such as squid, for example. The next animal on our list is the blue whale. Believe it or not, the biggest living animal on Earth actually started small. These days, the average mature blue whale can reach up to 100 feet in length and weigh up to 200 tons. That's more or less the weight of 40 elephants put together, or 30 Tyrannosaurus rexes, or 2,670 average-sized people. Blue whales have to eat up to 50 million calories per day to support that body. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Big Macs, just FYI. But blue whales weren't always this big. They actually evolved from a four-legged mammal that lived on Earth around 48 million years ago. Their ancestor was called Pakicetus, and it was only 6 feet long. Here's a fun fact. To be able to live in the water as one does today, the blue whale had to go through some intense adaptations. A blue whale can replace up to 80 to 90% of oxygen in its lungs each time it takes a breath. A human replaces only up to 15% for comparison. It allows these animals to dive for up to 1 hour at a time, down to a staggering depth of 330 feet. Elephants were bound to make the list. Elephants are currently the largest land animals on Earth. They can grow to be about 13 feet tall and weigh up to 7 tons. That's pretty small if we compare it to the other animals that once lived on Earth, right? But if we placed a 6-foot-tall human next to an elephant, we'll see it's not at all that small. African elephants are bigger than their close relatives, Asian elephants, and they have a similar lifespan to humans, up to 70 years. Pokemon might have made us collectively wish that salamanders were real-life dragons, although they're not. They can still be pretty cool though. There's a giant species of salamander that is known to be the largest living amphibian. They can grow to be as long as a regular-sized human, reaching up to 6 feet. I bet that wouldn't be a pleasant underwater encounter.
Billions of years ago, our whole solar system was nothing but a big cloud of dust and gas floating in space. Then, something happened to disturb that cloud, but scientists still aren't sure what exactly it was. It could have been a distant star that turned into a supernova with a bang that caused the dust cloud to start spinning. As it spun faster, the dust and gas got pulled into the center and created a thick, spinning disk called a solar nebula. The gravity at the center became so strong that hydrogen atoms started crashing into each other, producing helium and a lot of energy. As a result of all these space shenanigans, we got our sun about 4.6 billion years ago. This process used up more than 99% of the dust and gas in the big cloud. The leftover stuff started to come together to make different shapes. The cloud kept spinning, and bits of matter bumped into each other and stuck together. Some of these clumps got big enough to have their own gravity, which pulled even more matter to them. This is how the planets, including our Earth, were made. You wouldn't recognize our planet though, as it was nothing like we know and love it today. It was hot, and I'm not talking about perfect beach weather hot. It was scorching hot, as it was mostly made of magma, which is basically melted rock. Just imagine how hot it should be to make the stones melt. After a few 100 million years, Earth started to cool down. As the planet changed and its outer crust started to form, there were lots of volcanic eruptions. These volcanoes released water vapor, ammonia, and carbon dioxide into the air around the planet. Slowly, oceans started to form from the water vapor. The planet was every introvert's dream back then, with not a single living being around until the day when the first simple lifeforms began to appear and live in the new oceans. Those tiny organisms were single-celled microbes that gave birth to all future lives, including yours. They left signs in rocks that are about 3.7 billion years old. The signs were a type of carbon molecule made by living things. Then, at least 2.4 billion years ago, cyanobacteria evolved. These were the first organisms to make food using water and the sun's energy, and they released oxygen. This caused a big increase in oxygen, which made it hard for other microbes that couldn't handle oxygen to survive. Then tiny microbes started living inside other tiny microbes. This way, they were forming organelles, small structures inside a cell with a specific function. One important organelle is called mitochondria, and it helps turn food into energy. For the first time, DNA got packed inside a part of the cell called the nucleus. These new complex cells, called eukaryotic cells, had different parts that each did a special job to help the whole cell work better. Soon enough, the earliest animals would rule the world. But don't get your hopes up. They weren't fluffy kittens. All the changes on Earth were happening against the background of the supercontinent Rodinia, which formed around 1.2 billion years ago. It pulled together almost all of Earth's land masses into one gigantic piece of land. It was surrounded by a massive ocean, so the whole planet looked like a giant land and sea puzzle. Unlike the green, lively continents we have now, Rodinia was barren and rocky, with no plants or animals on land. So, early life forms like algae thrived in the ocean. The breakup of Rodinia caused changes in Earth's climate and ocean currents. New coastlines and environments eventually helped diversify life on Earth. Cells began living together and finally evolved into the first animals around 800 million years ago. Sponges, and I don't mean the loofah you use to shower, were some of the earliest animals. By around 580 million years ago, they had neighbors, including fronds, ribbons, and quilts. But then, another 40 million years later, which is like a minute in evolutionary time, the conditions changed. Oxygen levels rose, and the first animals were replaced by new life forms. It was the beginning of the Cambrian period, the time of the giant shrimps and other creatures you'd rather never meet. Those invertebrates that ruled the planet looked so weird and not Earth-like that it took scientists years to realize these scary creatures were actually the ancestors of modern mollusks and crustaceans. Meet hallucigenia, a creature with 7 or 8 pairs of spindly legs, the same number of paired spikes coming from its back, and a head you won't tell from its tail. Another cool creature from that period was the abnormal shrimp. Unlike most animals back then that were tiny, it was over 3 feet from head to tail. There was also the Weewaxia, that looked sort of like a stegosaurus, but without a head, a tail, or any legs. It looks like these creatures were born without defensive spikes and grew them as they got older. If they ran a beauty contest in the Cambrian period, Aishia would likely win. It had many common features with today's tardigrades. Although it was just 1 or 2 inches long, it was the nightmare of prehistoric sponges, and it clung to them with its multiple claws. We still have some live souvenirs from the Ordovician period living among us. Take lampreys, for example. The marine life kept flourishing. There were squid-like nautiloids with tentacles and a special shell with gas-filled chambers that made them float in the water. They swam well by squirting water out of their bodies and used their tentacles to catch prey. Another group of sea hunters was the conodonts with their tiny fossil teeth. The few complete fossils we have found show that they looked like eels with big eyes to spot their food. Fish back then were small, with mouths that pointed downward, which helped them suck up food from the ocean floor. Lampreys and hagfish are their living relatives today. The hard-bodied arthropods, like early relatives of crabs and spiders, started exploring life on land. They moved into freshwater and shallow lagoons, and one type of these creatures was the horseshoe crab. Even though they're called crabs, they're actually more like spiders and scorpions. Around this time, the first simple plants also began to grow on land. But a surprise ice age interrupted their plans. Most of the world's land at that time came together to make a huge supercontinent called Gondwana. It included what is now Africa, South America, Antarctica, and Australia. Another supercontinent, called Laurentia, included what would become North America. Gondwana drifted south until it settled at the North Pole. Huge glaciers started forming over what is now Africa. This led to a 20-million-year ice age and a huge extinction. At least half of all marine species were wiped out around 443 million years ago. The landscape wasn't looking too cozy, but have no worries, the first plants were about to hit the land. As temperatures rose and sea levels climbed again, the oceans began to recover during the Silurian period. Huge reef systems grew in the warm, clear tropical seas. You can still see remnants of these ancient reefs today. They are limestone rocks. The oceans were full of tiny creatures called plankton. At the top of the food chain were these terrifying sea scorpions. Some of these sea scorpions grew to over 6 feet long, and they were the largest arthropods ever. They looked like giant scorpions with huge, compound eyes to spot their prey, the primitive fish. They caught it with their strong, claw-like pinchers. Speaking of fish, they were starting to change and found new ways to eat, not just by sucking up food from the ocean floor. A group of spiny sharks developed jaws which made their mouths more dangerous. Even though these jawed fish weren't very big during this time, they were becoming better hunters and would later become top predators. On land, the first tiny, creepy crawlies began to show up. They were primitive centipedes and early ancestors of spiders. The first plants on land didn't have leaves, but they could stand up straight, thanks to their stiff stems. They also had special tubes inside them to move water and nutrients around, just like how our veins move blood. Mosses and other small plants soon followed and helped create a better environment for animals to start living on land too. The climate was nice and warm. The supercontinent Gondwana was still near the South Pole, but the big ice sheets from before melted away. Plants continued to grow and change during the Devonian period, but you'd probably be more impressed by a millipede as long as a car. If you visited the Earth back then, you'd wander in the first big forests made up of lycophytes, horsetails, and ferns. By the end of this period, the first successful trees appeared. They could grow really tall, up to 98 feet, about half as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and had thick trunks about 3 feet wide. They didn't have real leaves but had fern-like parts growing right on their branches and used spores to reproduce. The insects of that time were pretty wild. One of them was a huge dragonfly with wings as wide as a big pizza. This giant dragonfly lived in open places where it had room to fly, and its big eyes helped it spot its food, smaller bugs. It used its spiky legs to grab the insects it wanted to eat. Another monster from that time had wings about 22 inches wide and a mouth that looked like a beak. On the ground, the biggest bug ever known on Earth was wandering wild and free. It was a millipede as long as a car that likely ate fruits and seeds. The insect grew into such giants thanks to the extra oxygen in the air, up to 35% instead of the usual 21%. They could easily breathe even when they were huge, and there were no big birds to eat them, so they could grow really big and explore land and sky with nothing to worry about. But not for long. Fish started changing into the first animals that could live on land. These early fish had special fins that worked like arms and legs, and they could explore new, swampy areas where there were lots of plants and no big predators. One of the oldest animals that show this change mostly lived in shallow water, where it walked on the bottom. It had a head that looked like a crocodile's, and it could move its neck and breathe air through its nostrils. It grew up to 10 feet long. Its back fins were bigger and stronger than the front ones, which helped it move on land. At the end of the Devonian period, Earth went through 2 long extinction periods when up to 70% of sea creatures disappeared. But the plants and animals living on land mostly survived these tough, cold times. It also had a cool, distant cousin, coelacanth. This fish was almost 5 feet long and had 4 fins that looked like limbs, but it never moved to land. It adapted to life in deep water, hiding in caves during the day and hunting at night. This deep-sea lifestyle probably helped coelacanth survive 4 of Earth's major mass extinctions. For a long time, people thought it was extinct until one was found off the coast of South Africa in 1938. So yep, it still lives in the deep parts of the Indian Ocean. During the late Paleozoic era, animals including a crazy mix of a polar bear and a saber-toothed cat got all independent and didn't have to live near the water anymore. They started laying eggs on land. Fish were becoming more different from each other, and trilobites were starting to disappear. New plants called conifers were growing, and 2 new types of animals also appeared. There were marine reptiles like early lizards and snakes and archosaurs, which later turned into crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds. This period is sometimes called the Age of the Cockroaches, because an early kind of cockroach was lurking all over the world. But there was something way cooler than a cockroach, like a mix of a polar bear and a saber-toothed cat. It was an early relative of today's mammals with long legs that helped it run fast. It had sharp, saber-like teeth that could slice through the necks of huge plant-eating animals, but it used its teeth to rip big chunks of meat rather than chew. Scientists aren't sure if it had scales like its older relatives or fur like its mammal cousins, but they found hints of ancient poop that smaller relatives had hair, so this guy probably did too. There was also a big reptile that lived in the cold deserts of Eurasia. Imagine a creature as big and heavy as a black rhino, weighing about 2,400 pounds and stretching around 10 feet from head to tail. It was covered in thick, bumpy plates all over its body, which helped protect it from predators. Because it was so heavy and slow, it couldn't run fast, so these tough plates were its best defense. To stay so big and strong, Scutosaurus had to eat a lot of food all the time. It was one of the first big plant-eating animals to live on Earth. These animals were like early versions of big dinosaurs that came later. Even though Scutosaurus looked a lot like those dinosaurs, it was not closely related to them, kind of like how we're not closely related to whales and dolphins. The closest living relative to Scutosaurus is the tortoise, another slow-moving armored reptile. When you look at this guy, Dimetrodon, the first thing you notice is the big sail on its back that could remind you of some dinosaurs, but it was actually more closely related to us. It was a proto-mammal and had some unique features, especially in its skull. It had a small hole behind its eyes where jaw muscles attached, which is something dinosaurs didn't have. Dimetrodon also had different types of teeth for different uses, unlike dinosaurs that had rows of the same kind of teeth. The sail on its back was probably used to show off and attract mates, or scare away rivals. The last period of the Paleozoic, called the Permian, ended with the largest mass extinction on Earth ever. It wiped out more than 90% of all the species on the planet. The 2 big landmasses named Euramerica and Gondwana joined together to form one huge supercontinent called Pangaea. Around Pangaea was a giant ocean. Because Pangaea was so big, The middle of it was probably very dry, since rain clouds couldn't travel far enough to bring water to the interior. This made Pangaea's center a very dry place. The Permian extinction left room for new creatures to thrive. One of them was this guy, looking like a real-life Nessie from Scotland. It was a 20-foot-long reptile with a super long neck, even longer than its body and tail combined. And nope, it wasn't a dino yet, but a protosaurus that lived during the Middle Triassic period, which was just before the time of the first dinosaurs. Scientists used to think it was too heavy on top to walk on land because of its long neck, but newer studies show that most of its weight was centered around its body, so it could walk just fine. Between 240 million and 230 million years ago, a new successful group of animals started to rule the world. They managed to evolve from mostly dog and horse-sized creatures into the biggest monsters that ever existed on Earth. Scientists say they managed to do it thanks to some massive volcanic events. But it's a topic for another video. Life during and after the dinosaurs.
Big herds of dinosaurs run through the forest. The temperature rises rapidly, and everything behind them begins to ignite. Some dinosaurs get stuck in swamps and can't get out. Pterodactyls fly over their heads as they try to avoid the blast wave that will soon cover the Earth. This event happened about 66 million years ago. It wiped out almost every living thing on Earth. Birds and flying dinosaurs were just about the only ones who could survive the most massive extinction event ever. Hey, don't blame me, I wasn't around then. Let's go down their evolutionary tree to look at the world's first bird, Archaeopteryx. It was about the size of a modern raven, but it looked like a small dinosaur with feathers. It had many small conical teeth, almost like alligators. It's because Archaeopteryx was closer to reptiles than to birds. However, its brain was 3 times larger than that of these reptiles. Although it had wings with feathers, it could hardly fly like modern birds. Its shoulder joints didn't allow it to lift its wings above its back, so it couldn't make a full wing beat. Most likely, Archaeopteryx was capable of gliding flights with small wing flaps. Evolution has led to more evolved species capable of full flight. Pterodactyls. These guys had no feathers, but membranes made of skin and muscle. Its wingspan was about the length of a human leg. It could fly perfectly and catch fish and small animals. Although flying dinosaurs could easily outrun terrestrial predators like velociraptors and T-Rexes, most of them didn't make it through the impact of a giant meteorite. Let's look at this event step by step to see how they got to our time. 10 minutes before the meteorite crash. A massive rock about the size of Manhattan Island is moving towards Earth in space. It weighs 460 trillion tons. That's like 3 trillion blue whales, the heaviest mammals that ever lived on Earth, and it's approaching our planet at 12 miles per second. At that speed, it could cross the Atlantic Ocean in just 4.5 minutes. That's twice as fast as our modern spacecraft could fly. 5 seconds before the meteorite crash. Ooh, this is getting tense. The Earth's gravitational force continues to pull the giant meteorite. It blows a hole in our atmosphere and creates a popping sound so loud you could hear it on the other side of our planet. All the animals on our planet wake up in a panic. They lift their heads up and see a huge rock that begins to burn through the air. Smaller fragments start to break away from the main meteorite. This fire is so bright that it shines almost like the sun. Flying dinosaurs and other ancestors of modern birds are the first to sense danger. They make a beeline to the sky and try to fly as far away from the impact site as possible to save their lives. The moment of impact. The colossal mass and velocity of the meteorite give it an enormous amount of energy. As soon as it touches the Earth, it causes an explosion of 150 trillion tons of TNT. The blast wave literally rips out chunks of our planet and throws them up. A huge wall of energy begins to move from the point of impact in all directions. It snatches the trees out with their roots and pushes them to the ground like dominoes. The shockwave completely wraps around our planet. This energy turns into heat. Everything around the impact site begins to ignite. Green jungles and trees turn into smoldering charcoal in seconds. The ground and rocks simply evaporate. The collision caused a massive earthquake. Some dinosaurs may have fallen into cracks that appeared in the ground. A strong earthquake caused a tsunami, with waves higher than the Empire State Building. Dinosaurs that weren't trapped in the burning forest were washed away by the enormous waves. The dinosaurs of North America tried to escape by running to the north, but the blast wave inevitably catches up with them. Flying dinosaurs have no problem with earthquakes or tsunamis. They fly high enough to avoid the giant waves, but they will have to contend with continuously falling meteorite debris. 5 minutes after the meteorite crash. A meteor shower of giant rock fragments continues to fall to Earth. Some meteorites were the size of a car, others were more like a large building. Ashes and dust rise into the air. Their temperature is so high that they melt and turn into liquid lava and then fall back to Earth, causing more fires. Meteor showers cause trouble for flying dinosaurs too. They have to maneuver and dodge the falling red-hot rocks. The high temperatures are a huge problem for them because it might make them lose feathers. With no feathers, they aren't able to fly. 10 hours after the meteorite crash. The dinosaurs continuously ran north all this time. They found themselves in unfamiliar territory with many swamps. Giant dinosaurs like T-Rexes have legs as long as an adult human's height. They have a chance to get through this terrain, but if they fell, they could never get back up. The smaller dinosaurs, like Triceratops, had short legs and couldn't go through the dense swamps. 1 month after the meteorite crash. 15 trillion tons of ash were ejected into our atmosphere. A dark cloud blocked the sun, and the Earth was immersed in complete darkness. Surviving plants couldn't feed on the sun's energy and stopped producing oxygen. Surviving dinosaurs could hardly breathe because of the lack of air and a large amount of dust. The lack of sunshine in the sky made phytoplankton disappear. Many marine animals were left without their only source of food. The dust and ashes in the atmosphere prevent our planet from getting heat from the sun, and the temperature here is beginning to drop. The place where the meteorite fell was rich in sulfur. This toxic acid evaporated at the time of the impact and formed in clouds. Now there are acid rains on Earth. Flying dinosaurs now have to hide from these rains. They have to stay in caves and can't go outside to get some food. So far, a large number of terrestrial and flying dinosaurs have survived. They come out to see the aftermath of the disaster. The site of the impact was in present-day Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula. The Chicxulub crater is located here. It's about 93 miles wide, like half of all of Lake Michigan, and it's 12 miles deep. You could plunge the whole Mount Everest in there, and there would still be 6.5 miles of available space. It wasn't the impact itself that made the dinosaurs disappear. The fire destroyed most of the plants the herbivorous dinosaurs ate. With no food, their numbers dwindled rapidly. Predatory dinosaurs had nothing to eat either. Acid rain and the disappearance of phytoplankton threatened all marine life. Even though birds managed to avoid the blast waves and tsunami, they were short of food too. About 80% of all birds didn't make it to the end of the extinction event. The problem was that all of the forests on Earth were wiped out. Most birds would nest and live in trees. Besides that, the forests were always full of food, from all kinds of ants and termites to flying insects and small mice. So, only those species that lived on the ground and could fly well survived. Most likely, they fed on the seeds of small surviving plants. This habit made flying dinosaurs lose their teeth during evolution. Instead of jaws with a bunch of sharp teeth, they got long beaks to grab tiny seeds from the ground. Although Earth looks like a terrible place to live now, there's an evolutionary boom for birds. They have to travel long distances in search of food. Their wings get stronger. They also feel safe from predators who regarded them as food before. No T-Rex now catches a sleeping bird off guard. About 1,000 years after the collision, the first dense forests appear. It gives another boost to evolution. 1 million years later, forests full of food are populated by the ancestors of modern mouse birds. And 65 million years later, in modern times, we have about 10,000 species of birds. Pigeons, crows, eagles, and hawks, even penguins. These are all descendants of the dinosaurs. But there were other survivors. Some alligator and crocodile ancestors were able to adapt to changing conditions. About 80% of turtle species managed to survive the mass extinction, and now their descendants live among us. Snakes and lizards were also able to wait out the hard times in their burrows. Even some mammals, like monotremes, survived. this hedgehog-sized animal was able to continue to evolve. Many millions of years later, these mammals evolved into primates, which later gave life to modern humans. Much, much later came the iPhone. Well, hey there! We dive back in time and into the oceans over 500 million years ago, just, because we can. Whoa! Watch out! It's not megalodon or giant sea reptiles you need to look out for here. It's a bizarre, unearthly-looking creature called Anomalocaris. The name means unlike any other shrimp, and I think you'll agree, it looks like a nightmarish cross between a shrimp and a modern-day centipede. 2 tentacles protruding from its face, each lined with razor-sharp teeth. Oh yeah, and this thing was about the size of your leg. With a wave-like movement of the flaps on each side of its body, it was graceful for a terrifying creature. It was also more advanced than any other life on this planet at the time. Especially those huge eyes. You have only one lens in each of yours. This giant shrimp had 16,000. That's 4 times more than a common housefly. And you know how good their vision is. Good enough to dodge that swatter every time. All this allowed Annie to become one of the first animals on this planet to feed on others. Yep, here it is. Earth's first hunter. Its favorite meal? Trilobites. Hey, try a bite. Those are the ancient ancestors of crabs. Some of their fossils have marks on them in the same shape as the monster shrimp's mouthparts. Terrors of the past like this got to be so giant thanks to more oxygen in the atmosphere. A perfect example of this, Meganeuropsis. Imagine a dragonfly. Now make it as big as a cat, and with a wingspan longer than your arm. Megan, the monster-sized dragonfly, could easily grab other insects or even small animals, and she ruled the air with quick movements. Back then, there were still no large birds or other airborne enemies for this behemoth bug, so it was safe and free to grow as large as this planet would allow. Piranhas of the past were also jumbo-sized. Mega piranha was about 3 times the size of the river terrors we have today. Its bite force was about the same as a tiger's, and those striped kitties bite down 2 times harder than lions. That means it probably not only dined on other fish and any land creatures that, got too close to the water, but it could also easily crunch down on large turtles and other unlucky shelled creatures. And fun fact, modern-day piranhas bark like dogs when they're about to enter a confrontation. It actually sounds more like a frog's ribbit. But makes you wonder, what did this mega-sized ancient cousin sound like? A bear roaring? How about giant sea scorpions the size of your bed? Go back about 460 million years and you'd see them swimming under you. And watch out for that tail. Scientists still don't know if these creatures could use it to inject venom like your standard land scorpion. But something tells me I wouldn't want that thing anywhere near me. Then there's this guy, Therizinosaurus. Terry looks sort of like a goose with long arms. Oh, and did I mention this goose dino is about 2 stories tall and longer than a bus? Yow! Its arms make the T-Rexes look even more bite-sized, each 8 feet long, almost triple the length of T-Rexes. And on the end, razor-sharp claws the size of your whole arm. Now, don't worry about those lengthy claws too much, though. Terry probably used them to cut through giant termite nests. So, this huge reptilian goose was more interested in eating bugs and plants. Another mega monster for you, Megatherium. The giant ground sloth could look a giraffe straight in the eye and weighed as much as a hippo. It moved mainly on its hind legs and used its massive tail as support. He had huge paws with colossal knife-sized claws. The sloth could use them to defend itself from enemies and to bend tree branches in search of food. But the biggest danger to the giant ground sloth wasn't dinosaurs or saber-toothed tigers. It was our own species. Yep, humans showed up just in time to meet this fellow and to, eat him up. Titanoboa was a terrifying 50-foot snake. as long as the great megalodon itself. It was also more than 2 times heavier than the heavyweight champion among snakes today, the green anaconda. Crocodiles were a regular on this serpent's menu. Titanoboa could swim 3 times faster than the fastest Olympic swimmer our species has ever seen. It was quicker and more dangerous in the water than outside it. And don't forget the boa part of the snake. This massive snake wasn't venomous. Instead, it liked to squeeze. Remember that giant shrimp from earlier? Well, Opabenia looks like its teeny-tiny finger-sized cousin. And instead of 2 toothy tentacles, this thing had a vacuum hose coming out of its face. On the end of that trunk, what looks like a single crab claw. Add 5 eyes and a mouth under its head, and you've got a recipe for something not of this planet. Only it is. This creature used its trunk like an elephant does. Its claw grabbed food from the bottom of the ocean and brought it up to its mouth. This thing is so weird-looking that, apparently, when the scientists who discovered it presented his findings to an audience, they all laughed as if he were joking. Now, a real-life monster, the Tully monster. From a distance, it looks a bit like Nessie, that long neck and teeth-lined jaws. But get closer, and you'll see it's more like a long nose with a mouth attached at the end, like a mosquito. Its eyes are further back, sticking out of tubes all snail-like. Tully was an ancient mollusk, about the size of your forearm. It probably dined on jellyfish and shrimp 300 million years ago. Thylacus smilus will put a smile on your face as long as you don't get too close. No, it's not a relative of the saber-toothed tiger. It was a marsupial, making it more related to a kangaroo than anything. And if you compare them to body size, its fangs were actually longer than a saber-toothed tiger's. And they grew continuously. As for that beard on its chin, that's actually all chin. The lower jawbone grew down to a point under the mouth. Those fangs were rooted to the skull, going way back to its eyes. When the mouth was closed, that bony beard protected the long, sharp teeth from breakage. Staganapolis, not to be confused with Minneapolis, might look like a big crocodile with a squished-in snout, but it was mostly harmless. Its small head and very few teeth meant the reptile didn't have much to work with when protecting itself. That's what all those armored scales were for, and no need for huge fangs or long rows of razor-sharp teeth when you're a plant eater. That beak-like tip on its nose allowed the stag to dig up plants. So, really, this reptile was more like a 10-foot scaly pig than a croc. Basilosaurus was a type of ancient whale that lived on our planet about 45 million years ago. Not quite as long as a blue whale, but this guy was still big enough to munch down on other whales and even sharks. Some people believe these monsters could still exist today. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen a giant sea dragon, and Basilosaurus fits the description. Plus, 90% of our oceans are unexplored. There's plenty of space to hide a sea monster. But scientists haven't found any fossils of this ancient whale younger than 3.7 million years. So, this myth is busted. Stegosaurus is one of the most recognizable dinosaurs that ever lived. It can easily be distinguished by those huge spikes on its tail and the bony plates on its back. It was twice as long as a giraffe and nearly 5 times heavier. But compared to its body size, it had the world's smallest brain. It was no larger than a dog's. Pelagornis had the largest wingspan of any bird ever discovered. It was twice the size of the largest bird today, the wandering albatross. Such huge wings made it hard for the bird to take off. It could only do so by jumping off cliffs. And when it finally spread its wings, this giant could only go about 40 miles per hour. The fastest bird today can reach speeds 5 times that.
A pod of dolphins is happily playing near the water's surface in the North Pacific Ocean on a sunny day. They're about as happy as can be until the surface of the water begins to ripple. It becomes more pronounced, like a possible tsunami or an underwater volcano preparing to blast. Their instincts tell them to hightail it out of there, but they don't know which way is the safest path out. Abruptly, a tremendous roaring sound fills the air. The water explodes outwards as a giant whale bursts into the air. Hello, mama! Wait, that's no whale. It's an ichthyosaur, a giant sea dragon type monster from the Triassic period. It's a massive 55 feet long and weighs 45 tons. It doesn't look too dissimilar to a dolphin, but this sea monster isn't any cousin. The dolphins scatter back beneath the water. Fortunately for them, the ichthyosaur is not interested in having them for lunch. It's merely playing as well. This particular species is far more used to eating marine mollusks, smaller fish, and squid. But there's nothing in sight, so it disappears back below the surface, swimming majestically with its huge fins and long eel-like tail. It had once roamed the land, but like other prehistoric land reptiles, including modern-day whales and dolphins, it returned to the sea and evolved over millions of years. Its limbs have been transformed into flippers. Some species had digits on their flippers, or phalanges. They could almost pass for human hands. Well, hello there. Some possessed a dorsal fin. Their heads were pointed, and their jaws contained conical teeth to catch smaller prey. They had large eyes, probably used for seeing in deep waters. Their tail fin made for a powerful stroke. Like some other sea creatures, they could breathe air and were warm-blooded. They were sleek and as beautiful as some of today's ocean creatures. Unexpectedly, an underwater time vortex opens in front of it, sucking in everything in its path like an underwater black hole. The ichthyosaur disappears inside, flailing about, unable to control its journey back into the deep past. Soon, it spat out again into its own natural timeline of the Triassic period, during the early dinosaur age, approximately 247 million years ago. It swims with others of its kind. They lived in herds or hunting groups, while varying forms evolved worldwide, such as the smaller Mixosaurus. Let's stay with this one, because it will eventually find its way into modern human hands. In evolutionary terms, the ichthyosaurs lasted for a very long time, millions of years. There are many complex factors involved with how they became extinct, but in simplistic terms, environmental changes brought out declines in smaller food groups and more brutal predatory groups. Some fish had evolved as well and became too fast for the ichthyosaur. So we will leave our poor friend here, unable to find enough food and losing out to the tougher competition. It's hungry, tired, and weak. It simply drifts away with the currents, eventually finding itself resting on the ocean floor. Millions of years passed. During the Triassic and Jurassic era, sea levels gradually ebb away, exposing vast regions of the desert. The area we're focusing on became Nevada, in the western part of the United States. During the Cretaceous period, a volcanic island chain formed. Geological upheaval continued, bringing the ocean floor up into modern mountains. Embedded in the rock, well, you can guess, not only ancient invertebrates, but more modern creatures such as mammoths and giant sloths. What an incredible array of wildlife. But we're not here for them today. Let's find out what happened to our friend. Jump forward in time again to 1998. The place, the Augusta Mountains of northwestern Nevada, or more specifically, a place called Fossil Hill. Protruding out of the rock were a few vertebrae. Researchers could tell whatever creature it belonged to. It was clearly enormous. It was so embedded in the rock and complex that the excavation took many years. In September of 2011, the excavators found more of the beast, the well-preserved skull, forelimbs, and chest region. It wasn't until 2015 that the now obviously giant ichthyosaur could be fully extracted. The surviving fossils were a skull the size of a fully grown man, a shoulder, and a flipper-like appendage. Even then, it took a helicopter to move it. The team named the new species Symbospondylus youngorum. Symbospondylus is a Greek word meaning spine. Let's call this one Ichthyosaur spiny from now on, because it should have a name by now. And let's face it, it's a lot easier to pronounce. Spiny was airlifted to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles and further shipped to the University of Bonn in Germany. The study was undertaken by vertebrate paleontologist Martin Sander and his colleagues while collaborating with the University of Mainz. It was a unique and truly electrifying find, as the marine reptile was the largest animal ever discovered from this time. As far as we know, stated Martin Sandler, it was even the first giant creature ever to inhabit the Earth. You can think of Spiny as the underwater T-Rex of his time. He's also quite remarkable, as his type lived only 3 to 5 million years after a mass extinction event, known as the Great Dying. It happened roughly 252 million years ago. It took out approximately 90% of the world's life forms. What caused it? The short version is elevated temperatures and increased acidification in the oceans. Once one part of the food chain extinguishes, it causes a domino effect, as you can imagine. Soon, there's little left to eat, and only the sturdiest can survive. The atmosphere also had high levels of carbon dioxide. Theories argue that giant volcanic eruptions caused this in Siberia, known as the Siberian Traps. It was the largest volcanic eruption in the past 500 million years. The eruptions lasted a staggering 2 million years. Large volumes of basaltic lava covered a large area of Siberia. Even today, the site is covered by about 3 million square miles of basaltic rock. Other theories say that an asteroid caused the Great Dying, rather than the volcanoes. In any regard, the impact was the same, and 81% of Earth's marine species and 70% of the land-based vertebrate species were no more. There have been numerous mass extinction events, but Spiny's size and existence are extraordinary compared to the Great Dying. It usually took 9 million years for species to recover and grow to this size, but he came into being in less than half that time. Using sophisticated computer models, the researchers examined the likely food web running through the area now known as Fossil Hill. They recreated the ancient environment through the available data, finding that marine food webs must have supported giant creatures like the ichthyosaurs. The theory is that our Spiny fed on a diverse and rich diet of marine mollusks, known as ammonoids, that flourished from 1 to 3 million years after the Great Dying. The now extinct ammonites filled the ecological void following the mass extinction and had excellent living conditions without much prey to interfere with them. Ichthyosaurs also evolved rapidly because they were the first more giant creatures to populate the world's oceans. The mollusks they fed off were also exposed to less competition. Spiny had a massive food supply. He chowed down like there was no tomorrow. Unlike whales that become large due to eating foods like plankton, Spiny and his fellow species grew big on the ammonites, and it took them a much shorter time. That's a good message for you kids to eat healthily. The exciting thing for us today is that these results show that marine ecosystems can build up and respond well to such dramatic changes as climate, atmosphere, or water conditions. They may have had different pathways, but some ichthyosaurs and whales have similarities. They both have large sizes and a lack of prominent teeth. Sperm whales dive deep to hunt giant squid. Spiny hunted similarly. They use a type of filter feeding to extract the food from the water. Our friend likely ate fish and possibly squid, and ever smaller ichthyosaurs. Ouch. Other ichthyosaur forms had lots of teeth, with a skull more like a giant lizard. They had razor-sharp teeth. Ichthyosaurs swam the ancient oceans for nearly the whole of the dinosaur age. Ichthyosaur fossils have been found in many other countries, such as England, Norway, Japan, Germany, Colombia, China, and Australia. They were the underwater planet rulers of their day. As the sun sets 250 million years ago, we might imagine Spiny having a better outcome than he ultimately did, and popping his head out of the water to watch the orange hues of the pristine sky. He pauses for a moment before, once again, dipping underwater to join his friends, swimming happily away with the herd, looking for food and adventure in the deep blues of the Triassic Ocean.
Glass sponges are weird little creatures that sit in one place for thousands of years. From their favorite spot under the sea, they witnessed the first Europeans crossing over to the Americas. They can live up to 15,000 years. And what's even cooler is that they can control their aging process, speed it up or slow it down. They have a glass-like exoskeleton for protection. Lobsters can grow back a limb if they lose it, and they're basically immortal. They produce an unlimited number of enzymes that keeps their DNA young forever, and they just keep on growing. That means they outgrow their own shells. They have to shed their exoskeleton every now and then and upgrade to a bigger one. The largest lobster ever caught was 44 pounds off the coast of Nova Scotia. Scientists think this large lobster was around 100 years old. It was around when Edison invented the phonograph. This next creature is a mix between a jellyfish and a tree branch. Each end of the hydra has a ringed foot, and it spends its days chilling by lakes and rivers. Its tentacles grab onto tasty snacks that swim past it. So, what's the secret to its immortality? That's something everyone wants to know. The hydra has the ability to renew its stem cells. Scientists have been trying to do that for years. They can actually slow down their aging process. Now, these little sea creatures are red sea urchins. They sit on seaweed in shallow waters and are immortal. Well, we haven't been studying them long enough to know for sure. But scientists say they only grow in size, not in age. What? Well, they sort of stay like little baby urchins, but grow in size. Adult, baby urchin, okay. These little babies can reach around 100 years old, even 200. The slowest on the list? The giant tortoise. It can reach 200 years old. And one of the oldest is Jonathan. He's technically the oldest crawling land animal. He was born in 1832 and lives it up on a remote island called St. Helena. Jonathan's been through a lot. He's seen the very first American skyscraper, the Eiffel Tower. Oh yeah, he's also lived through every single World Series, starting when he was 71 years old. Now he can't see too well and he's lost his sense of smell, but he's still going strong. Back to the oceans and the Greenland shark. It's been known to be the longest living vertebrate and can live more than 400 years. Swimming around for that long in the deep, dark, cold ocean means these sharks are tough. They're able to withstand insane water pressure. Sharks are one of the only creatures today that haven't been affected too much by evolution. Many sharks have been around since the dinosaurs and haven't changed much. Scientists found out that they grow around a half an inch per year. So, with a little bit of quick math, they can easily find out the age of these tough sharks. Imagine seeing a shark that's older than the USA. This next creature is probably the most durable, indestructible, and cutest on the list. It's called a tardigrade, but scientists nickname it water bear because I guess it looks like one. But it's not exactly bear size. It has 8 legs and hands with a strange little nose. And these bizarre microscopic creatures are indestructible. They're known to live in the most extreme places on the planet. They're fine with temperatures as high as 300 and as low as minus 330. Volcanoes, frozen desert nights, they can even handle radiation and massive amounts of pressure in the deepest parts of the ocean. They can even survive the vacuum in space. No tiny little spacesuit or anything. That would be cute enough. So far, they've survived 10 days on the outside of a spaceship, but they could probably do longer. Tardigrades might be able to outlive humans if there's some sort of worldwide catastrophe. Microscopic organisms in charge of the planet. Wonder what that would look like. Whether it's all the volcanoes erupting at once, or another ice age, or even another pesky asteroid. Tardigrades probably wouldn't even notice. Scientists are studying them to see if they can help us with some next-level biotech. Now, just for fun, here's the mayfly. This poor little insect doesn't even make it past 24 hours on average. Females and males can make it to a whopping 2 days old. Talk about living in the moment. These little flies grow in swarms and are known to have one of the shortest lifespans of any creature. But as a species, well, they've been around for hundreds of millions of years. Jellyfish have discovered the fountain of youth, and surprise, surprise, it's been inside them all along. Not inspirational poster style, but literally, it's always been inside them. Jellyfish are able to reverse their aging process whenever they want. Imagine you're swimming along and then you think to yourself, gee, I kinda want to be 8 again. And poof, there you are. Who wouldn't want to go back to being 8? That's how jellyfish stay young and live stress-free. These brainless and boneless creatures can turn the clock back anytime they want, as long as no one bothers them. They're super chill, just floating in whatever direction the current takes them. Like, go with the flow?